This video is brought to you with the support of TrueFire. Learn, practice, and play with TrueFire. Welcome to 5-Watt World, where interested in helping you get the most music from the least gear. The end of the Tweed Bassman era had seen Fender build what many considered to be the ultimate guitar amp in the '59 Tweed Bassman. At that point, they could have sat back and kept building them, but that wasn't Leo's way. Always striving, always looking for new answers, he went on to create another decade of designs that touched all the popular music of its time. Tim Pierce's use of his 64 Bassman in the intro shows how incredibly versatile the piggyback Bassman amps are. Tim is simply pushing the front of the amp with an MXR micro amp boost, and it displays all the Fender goodness while also hinting at its Marshall offspring. So if you always wanted to know how this became this, then stay tuned, because this is the 5-Watt World short history of the Fender piggyback Bassman amps. If you enjoy our videos, make sure to subscribe or grab a t-shirt, hoodie, or a Stomp preset pack to support what we do. And become a bigger part of 5-Watt World, sign up for the Friends of 5-Watt on Patreon. The links are in the description. As the success of the '59 Bassman was still echoing around the world, Fender was already making radical changes behind the scenes. This would include a first new look, and then a complete change to the way the Bassman was being approached within the Fender new line of amplifiers. That new look was on display at the NAMM show as early as 1959, though some company records suggest that these early display cabs were empty, with no electronics inside. Full production of the new models would not start until January of 1960. Many of the model names were familiar, but everything else was about to change. There would be dual channel amps, cabinets with slant back front-mounted controls, round knobs instead of chicken heads, extra rugged vinyl Tolex covering and grill-mounted Fender logos. The blonde and brown Tolex amps of the early 60s are often called a bridge from the Tweed era to the black panel amps that were to come. But they're on the side of the bridge that's closer to the black panel amps than they were to the Tweed side of the bridge, if you follow me. New models in what Fender called their Professional series would sport the new piggyback design with a head separate from specially designed speaker cabinets. And it's here that our Bassman story resumes. In '61, the new Bassman was part of the Fender's newly launched Pro Series that included the Showman, Bandmaster, and Tremolux. Most evident was the new piggyback format, separate head and speaker cabinets covered in rough white Tolex, generally referred to as blonde, paired with oxblood maroon and gold grill cloth that shimmered like a California sunset. These early Professional Series Bassmans were paired with a cab that had a single 12-inch speaker. At first, this seems like a step back, but Fender was putting a lot of thinking into the design of the cabinets, and the new closed-back cabs brought a big increase in efficiency. The 6G6 circuit is unique in that the bass channel is still using a cathode follower stage to drive the bass tone control, but it placed this immediately after the input with the volume control. The treble control followed after another two gain stages provided by another triode 7025 preamp tube. The normal channel had Fender's new preamp in arrangement with the EQ section sandwiched between the two gain stages. This foreshadowed the design that would be a big part of the evolution that was eventually leading to the black panel sound of amps. The power was still managed with a GZ34 rectifier tube. Still, for the next two versions, the 6G6A and the 6G6B models in '62 and '63, they'd add the second 12-inch speaker. The speaker cabinets held two 12-inch Oxford or Jensen speakers. These speakers were supposed to be built to the same specifications, but of course they sounded slightly different. These new closed-back cabs and new speakers provided a brighter tone that was a perfect complement to the new surf music and its jangly Strats and Rickenbacker sounds. Along with some other small changes in the circuit, they moved from a tube rectifier to a solid-state diode rectifier, adding more power and punch. The Beatles had a long history with the new format Bassman piggyback rigs during their career. The Beatles acquired their blonde Bassman in '65 during the recording sessions for Rubber Soul. They set it up behind a baffle and used it to record McCartney's bass parts. According to Andy Babiak's Beatles Gear, this amp was likely one of the transitional models built in late '63 or early '64. They also had their Vox AC100s and AC30s in the studio, so it isn't known which amps were used for which recordings. That blonde Bassman was also pressed into service during the recording of Revolver to amplify Paul's new Rickenbacker 4001S bass. And it was used during the recording of Sgt. Pepper's alongside the blonde piggyback dual Showman amps that they acquired during the Revolver sessions. Pete Townshend relied on a '64 blonde Bassman with the latter wheat and gold weave grill cloth during '65. He matched it up with a pair of two Marshall 4x12 cabs, creating a full stack. He'd also use a '62 or '63 Tremolux the same way, and at times he'd daisy-chain the Bassman with either a vibrasonic combo or a Pro head using its own 4x12. The Bassman head and Marshall cab combination can be heard on The Who's My Generation. Townshend said in an interview that the combination was, quote, the sound of that album from 1965, end quote. It's important to say that Mike Bloomfield often used a blonde Bassman piggyback rig late in his career as well, and this may be why a young Robin Ford was gigging a black panel piggyback Bassman in and around San Francisco. Ford has said repeatedly that he was so heavily influenced by Bloomfield early on that he was something of a Bloomfield clone before he started to roll his jazz influences into his playing. Unknown to Ford at the time, a young amp designer named Alexander Howard Dumble was attending some of those early gigs, and it was the tone of Ford's piggyback Bassman that inspired him to build his first Overdrive Special amps. Robin Ford tells the story here.
I don't know if you know this, but it's a fact. Alexander told me later, after I'd already bought one of the amps from him, he told me that he used to hear me play up in Santa Cruz, Northern California, and I was playing through a blackface piggyback Bassman. And he said that's where he got the idea for the Overdrive Special. And he started modifying Fender Bassman heads and eventually developed the Overdrive Special. So I'm the reason, I'm the inception part for the Overdrive Special, which is probably the most famous amp in the world.
And so it was that the sound of a cranked black panel Bassman was what inspired one of the most sought-after boutique amps of all time, the Dumble Overdrive Special. And of course, that became Ford's lifetime amp, both a part of his tone and a part of his legacy. I reached out to TrueFire to be my sponsor because I've used them for years. With over 2 million users worldwide, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level player, TrueFire has lessons to enhance and inspire your playing. Get 35% off courses using the promo code 5watt35, or like I do, sign up for the All Access Pass to use the entire TrueFire catalog. I really like TrueFire, and I think if you give them a shot, you'll like them too. Sign up now to start your journey to being a better guitarist. I'd like to thank TrueFire for their support in making this video. Of course, you can't mention the piggyback Bassman without immediately thinking of Brian Setzer's use of the '63 blonde brown panel models. He famously pushes the volume of the normal channel right to the edge of its clean headroom with its original 1959 Gretsch 6120, or one of his modern signature Gretsch guitars. To this, back in the day, he'd added a Boss DM2 or an early deluxe Memory Man. But in the early 80s, he famously settled into using a Roland RE301 Space Tape Echo for his classic slapback tone. He'd started using the bass channel with the Boss and Memory Man, but when he settled on using the tape delay, he believed that the normal channel paired better with its quick slapback settings of around 120 milliseconds or less that he likes to use. And in their never-ending homage to the Beatles, Tom Petty and Mike Campbell, the Heartbreakers, cranked up early 60s Bassman amps to invoke some of that Liverpool magic. Late in '63, Fender changed the formula again, and they began to segue to the new black panel lineup that was to come. Initially, the circuit remained the same, with the white knobs on the new black panel faceplate, and retained the presence control. Most of the amps were still covered in blonde Tolex, but towards the end of the transition, they were given the black Tolex. These white knob, black panel Tolex models are often referred to as Tuxedo Bassman heads and are highly desirable and like the one that Tim Pierce used playing in the intro. I've heard my friend Tim Pierce say that a budding session guy could do pretty much everything he or she needs to with a Bassman head and a small collection of pedals. He demos that convincingly for us in the intro and outro of the video. Plugged into the normal channel, the amp offers the perfect black panel Fender tone, but with extra punch thanks to the output stage with heavy transformers designed to reproduce the low frequency of the bass as well. Halfway through 64, the circuit was changed dramatically and rapidly with the AA864 and AB864 versions. Outwardly, this was seen in the new skirted black knobs with numbers around the edges and the elimination of the presence control. But inside, things changed even more. The bass channel was given a preamp similar to the normal channel from before, but was voiced for the bass and with the additional gain stage. This bass channel now supported a new deep switch, while the normal channel was given a bright switch. The preamp was still made up of three 7025 tubes. The phase inverter was changed from a 12AX7 to a 12AT7, which has less gain and yielded more headroom before the amp would break up in the power section. These changes were made to improve the Bassman as a bass amp, but it continued to be very popular with guitarists. Black panel heads from the mid to late 60s would later become the amp for those looking for a loud tube-based platform for rock, punk, and garage players, and they had a great wattage to dollar ratio. By the time punk came around, 50 watts was seen as too little for real bass amp, but was still very crankable for use as a guitar amp. Social Distortion's Mike Ness's black panel Bassman was reportedly used for many of Kurt Cobain's guitar tracks on Nirvana's Nevermind. In the years following Fender's sale to CBS, the Bassman circuit evolved into the AA165. This new circuit is renowned for its smoother character, thanks to changes in the preamp and the negative feedback loop, along with its fixed bias output stage. And finally, before the silver panel years, there was one final circuit of the black panel years, the AB165. Though it was produced for only a few months, it is the least desirable of the black panel Bassman circuits. As the money counters at CBS looked to reduce warranty work and any form of complaints from players, the engineers added negative feedback loops and other harmonic content constrictors which left the amp without much of a personality or a soul. The silver panel amps Bassmans are often looked down upon, referred to as silverface or silver panel for the silver control panel and blue sparkle grill cloth. The 68s had an aluminum drip edge that makes that first year of silver panel amps immediately recognizable, along with a larger speaker cabinet that had arrived in the last of the black panel amps in 67. But halfway through 68, the larger cab's 12-inch speakers were replaced with a pair of 15-inch speakers, which made it more suited to bass and less suited for guitar. For this reason, among others, that the silver panel heads were used with other speaker cabinets like Marshall, like my friend Johan Sedgborn is using to demo the heads in this clip. Interestingly, when the cabinet was made of the new larger size, it was used for both the Bassman and the Bandmaster. The Bassman got the 15-inch speakers, and the Bandmaster, though in the new larger cab, retained the 12-inch speakers. At the factory, the cabs looked identical, so to differentiate them, they put a sticker that said Bassman on the 2x15-inch cabs. During the filming of Let It Be, the Beatles took delivery of two silver panel twin amps and a silver panel Bassman head along with a new 40-inch vertical cabinet loaded with a pair of 15-inch speakers. In the rehearsals at Twickenham, that sticker was still on the speaker cab, but later, in the filming, McCartney had moved the sticker to the front of his 63 Hofner bass. McCartney was the bassman. The silver panel Bassman was used for recording the Fender Bass 6 as well. In 69, Fender added its first true dedicated bass amp to the lineup with the 100-watt Super Bassman 2 that came with two 2x15-inch cabs. This rig was capable of producing some serious bass, but as it evolved in this direction, from tube to solid state, it became more and more of a bass amp and had less to do with the do-anything amps of its tweed beginnings. This final chapter might lead you to think that these silver panel amps are just doorstops, if they weren't so easily tweakable back to black panel status, or something even more creative. Want a Fender style preamp on one channel while adding a Marshall style to the other? No problem. For this reason, like a classic Marshall, it is very rare to find a silver panel Bassman that hasn't been at least lightly modified or breathed on in one way or another by a tech. But such is their reputation that changes like this, if they're done by an experienced tech, enhance rather than hurt their value. As mentioned in the Tweed Bassman video, in the 80s a small number of boutique builders began to offer Bassman copies, and amp techs everywhere enjoyed modifying the easy-to-work-on point-to-point brown, black, and silver panel amps. Fender got on board with its own Tweed Bassman reissues in 1990, and that amp remains in the catalog to this day. And there are still many reasonably priced vintage Bassman heads to be had out in the world. Fender currently catalogs a Fender Bassman 800 model. It's a hybrid amp with a tube preamp based on the 60s circuit, an XLR line-out, and an 800-watt Class D power amp. A fully modern bass amp with a channel for clean and another for more overdrive. The Fender Bassman has undergone countless transformations over the years, each contributing to the legacy. The circuit tweaks, aesthetic changes, and shifts in tonal character reflect not only the evolution of the guitar amplifier design, but also the changing landscape of popular music. Fender clearly understands the legacy of the Bassman name and the long shadow that it casts over the music of the last 70 years. If I missed your favorite part of the piggyback Bassman story, please put it in the comments for everyone to enjoy. I know from experience I can count on you. If you like this video, you probably enjoy my short history of the Tweed Bassman or the Marshall JTM 45, both of which are a part of the Bassman story. First, I need to thank my good friend Tim Pierce for writing and performing the intro and outro music for the video on his 64 Bassman. I called Tim with a question about a quote, and he said, "Well, I've got that amp up right now. Would you like a little piece of music for the video?" Who would say no to that? I need to thank the guys at Reverb for their permission to use the clip of Robin Ford telling the story of his original piggyback Bassman and the origins of the Dumble Overdrive Special. I need to once again thank my fellow YouTuber Johan Sedgborn for his permission to use his playing clips of the 3 distinct generations of Bassman heads through different speaker cabinets. I want to thank everyone that stopped by the store and picked up a t-shirt, hoodie, or a Stomp preset pack. And in particular, I need to thank the friends of 5-Watt. It's the guitar community I've always wanted. You're all 5-Watt world, I just make the videos. If you enjoyed this short history of the Fender Piggyback Bassman amps, hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that too. Thanks for hanging with me until the end. Until next time, this is Keith Williams. Thanks for being a part of the 5-Watt world.